There once lived a man named Leif, and if you had met him at the market, you would have thought him a fortunate man. But Leif couldn't feel it. Every evening he sat with his ledger to count what he hadn't yet reached instead of focusing on what he had earned already. He watched his neighbor load silver onto his cart and felt something hollow inside him. He watched the merchant ships come in heavy with foreign goods and thought, "That should be me. That will be me, soon." But soon is the most dangerous word a man can whisper to himself. There's no doubt that Leif was a hard-working man and well-disciplined with his money. He saved what he could, spent carefully, and traded honestly. But the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be seemed to never close. No matter how fast he moved, it moved faster. And so Leif began to listen to men he should have ignored. One day a trader named Sven arrived at the harbor with a cart full of amber and a mouth full of promises. He was the kind of man who always smelled of opportunity and rot. Those two things go together more than people admit. There's a valley 3 days east, a merchant that is offloading silver below market. His partner died. His debts are due. He needs to move it fast. First man that takes everything. I'm telling you, 'cause I can't go myself. My cart's too full. Everyone who heard him had the same thought. This is the one. This is the door that opens only once. Leif lay awake that night with numbers dancing in his head. He did the calculation 11 times. If the silver was even half what Sven described, he could triple his savings. He could close the gap. Finally. He kissed his wife on the cheek before dawn and told her he would be back. She caught his hand. "You're already enough," she said. He smiled, pulled away, and left. The road east took Leif through a pine forest, so thick you couldn't even see the sky. On the second day, his horse started limping. On the third, the rain came. By the time he reached the valley, everything Sven had said was true. The place was real, and the silver was real. But 40 other men had arrived before him. The good silver was gone. What remained was scrap. Tarnished, low grade, barely worth the cart ride home. He bought some anyway, 'cause he couldn't just go home with nothing. On the road back, something strange happened. He saw an old man sitting on a log at the edge of the road. He had one eye, a wide-brimmed hat, and a raven on each shoulder, feeding them from his palm like they were pets. He looked like a beggar. "You went for the silver," the old man said. Leif stopped. "How did you know?" "Because everyone does. Also, you have the look of a man who arrived after the feast." Leif laughed despite himself. "What feast? There was nothing left worth taking." The old man stood, and he was taller than Leif expected. He reached into his cloak and pulled out 2 leather purses that looked ordinary. "One of these fills itself every morning with 10 small coins," he said. "You'll never wake to find it empty. But the coins are small. Copper, not silver. The other fills only once. But it fills with gold. 50 coins, all at once, tonight. After that, it's empty forever." Leif looked at the purses. "Why would you give these to me?" "Because I am curious which one you take," said the old man, "and because the answer will reveal everything about your future." Leif reached for the second purse. Immediately, 50 gold coins, tonight. He didn't even have to think about it. Of course he took it. Who wouldn't? The old man said nothing. He simply watched. That night, Leif felt the purse grow warm in his hands. He opened it. Then 50 gold coins dropped into his palm. Heavy. Real. He stayed up counting them, then counting them again. He spread them across the table. He stacked them in towers of 10, then knocked the towers over and stacked them again. He held one up to the candle and watched it catch the light. He had never held this much wealth at once, not even close. By the time he finally slept, his fingers smelled of metal and his chest felt fuller than it had in years. For some time, Leif was the happiest man in town. In the first week, he paid every debt. He bought better stock for his stall, finer goods, better tools, a new set of weights that gleamed. That part was good. He was actually being sensible with his spending. But the coins didn't stop there. The second week, he bought a new coat. Why? Simply because he had gold in the house, and he had always wanted to be the kind of man other men noticed when he walked into a room. So he paid a merchant at the door with a coat made from wool imported from the south without haggling. The third week, he bought a second horse. He told himself it was an investment. A better horse meant faster travel. Faster travel meant better deals. The logic behind his thinking was shaky at best, but desire has a way of making logic fly out the window. By week 4, Leif had discovered something dangerous. The pleasure of being generous with other people's admiration. He started buying rounds at the tavern, not occasionally, all the time. He liked the way men looked at him when he waved his hand and told the barkeep to fill every cup. He liked the way they laughed louder at his jokes now, the way they leaned toward him when he spoke, how the room seemed to arrange itself around him. He had never been the center of a room before. It felt like warmth and belonging. He didn't stop to ask himself what it cost. Then came the schemes. A man named Halvard approached Leif at the docks one afternoon with a proposition. He knew of a fishing vessel that was pulling extraordinary catches up north. Shares in the business were available. The previous investor had pulled out unexpectedly. A shame, really, the man said. You could step in for a fraction of what it was worth. The returns would be extraordinary. Leif gave him 12 coins. Halvard never came back. A month later, a woman named Astrid pitched him a weaving business. 6 looms, skilled hands, an established buyer in the south who needed cloth by spring. I just need a small advance to purchase the thread, she explained. The returns will begin flowing within 60 days. She had papers. She had a nice smile. So Leif gave her 8 coins. But it turned out she had nothing else. So the weaving operation dissolved like salt in rain. He kept a tally in his ledger, though he had started keeping it in pencil instead of ink, as if the reversibility of the writing might somehow reverse the spending. The number shrank every week. He spent faster than he had imagined possible, which is the great lie that lump sums tell. They feel infinite right up until the moment they're gone. He bought new furniture for the house. His old table had been perfectly sturdy, but sturdiness isn't the same as the impressive, and Leif had begun to knead the house to reflect the story he was telling about himself. He bought a carved chest for the bedroom, silver candle holders, and a tapestry for the wall that cost more than he had originally paid for a month of stock. His wife said nothing, but she ran her hand across the old table on the day it was carried out, and her expression was something he didn't know what to do with, so he chose not to look. Time went by, and the coins dwindled. And then something shifted. The friends began to change. The men from the tavern who had laughed loudly and raised their cups in his direction began to arrive less and less often on the nights when Leif arrived, without the bright look of a man about to buy a round. They didn't leave rudely. They simply redistributed themselves toward whoever was buying. Leif watched it happen and told himself it meant nothing. Halvard, who had taken 12 coins and vanished, reappeared briefly to ask for a small additional loan, just enough to cover an unexpected complication with the boat. Leif, who hadn't yet fully understood what had happened, almost gave it to him. It was his wife who took the ledger from the shelf and set it open on the table between them. Halvard left without the loan. He also left without the pretense of friendship, and Leif felt the cold air he left behind. By midsummer the purse was empty, lighter than the day it had been given to him. Leif sat there with the empty purse in his hands for a long time. He had everything he had bought. He had nothing he had built. The months that followed were the hardest Leif had ever known, but not because he was now poor. He still has his stall, and his trade still functioned. His wife's steady hand had kept the household from complete disorder while he had spent his way through the windfall, so they were okay. They could survive. But surviving is not the same as living, and Leif had spent 9 months living at a height he couldn't sustain. Now the ground felt like punishment. This is the thing no one warns you about. It's not the loss of the gold that breaks you. It's the recalibration. The brain, having tasted abundance, doesn't quietly return to its previous settings. It holds the memory of that level like a reference point and measures everything below it as failure. So now, for Leif, the stall felt small, and coins it brought in felt thin compared to what he had. He lay awake doing the mathematics he should have done before. 10 coins a day. Every single day? That's 3,650 coins in a year. That is 73,000 coins over 20 years, and that's before compounding, before trading, and before the slow accumulation of interest. The show horse had to go because the hay cost more than the horse contributed, and Leif had run out of justifications for the expense. He sold it at a loss to a farmer outside the city who didn't ask too many questions. He walked home from that transaction with less than he'd walked in with, which struck him as a clean metaphor for most of the decisions he had made in the past year. The men from the tavern were mostly gone now. Leif was back to being just another man at a table with a half-empty cup. One man did stay. An old fisherman named Eric, who had known Leif since boyhood, who had watched the whole rise and fall of Leif. Eric would sit across from him in the evenings and say very little. He didn't need to say much. "You're angry at yourself," Eric said one night. "I'm angry at the old man," Leif said. He knew. He knew what I would choose, and he let me choose it anyway. "Would you have chosen differently if he'd warned you?" Eric asked. Leif opened his mouth. Then he closed it again. He sat with that question for a long time. It took Leif 3 more years to find the one-eyed man again. He was at the same log, same ravens, same calm. "You knew," Leif said. "I gave you a choice," said the old man. "You made it honestly. That's all any of us do." "I want the other purse," Leif said. The old man smiled for the first time. "Good, because it has been waiting." He stood up, reached into his cloak and placed it in Leif's hand. "But understand," the old man said, "this purse doesn't care if you're patient or impatient. It doesn't care if you're grateful or bitter. It fills every morning regardless. The only question is whether you will leave it to fill long enough, or whether you'll spend it faster than it can accumulate." "I won't," Leif said. "Everyone says that," said the old man, and then he was gone. Leif didn't tell anyone about the purse, not even his wife at first. He placed it on the high shelf above his workbench, where he could see it every morning without being able to easily grab it in a moment of weakness. And every morning he opened the purse and counted 10 small copper coins into his palm. Then he closed the purse and put them to work. He traded them instead of spending them. The first week's coins he used to buy a small quantity of salt from a trader who was moving stock quickly. He held the salt for 2 weeks and sold it to a cookhouse on the east side of the harbor for a modest gain. Nothing dramatic or impressive, the kind of transaction that doesn't make for a good story at the tavern. He tracked every move in a new ledger, one he kept in ink, because these transactions were decisions he was willing to own. Copper became slightly more copper. Slightly more copper became a small inventory. A small inventory became a relationship with a supplier. A relationship with a supplier became better terms. Better terms became margin. Margin, reinvested patiently and repeatedly, became the first genuinely significant number Leif had ever written in a ledger. He didn't tell anyone. His neighbors didn't even notice, because big wealth announces itself, but patient wealth doesn't. It moves like a tide so slowly you can't watch it rise. But one morning you look at the shore and everything has changed. In the second year, Leif bought a partial stake in a fishing boat because he had spent months watching the fishing trade, learning the patterns, understanding the costs and the catches and the timing. He knew what he was buying before he bought it. The stake paid modestly. He reinvested the return entirely. In the fourth year, he bought out the remaining stakes in the boat. The man selling was grateful for the fair price. Leif was grateful for the patience it had taken to wait until the price was fair. For a long time his wife said nothing. She had learned to let Leif's projects find their shape before she commented on them. But one evening she came to the workbench and found the ledger open and ran her finger down a column of numbers that had been climbing slowly, steadily, for nearly 4 years. She sat down. "How long?" she asked. "Since I came back from the road," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "You could have told me." "I didn't want to make promises," he said. "I only wanted to make things." She found the purse one morning, on a day when he had forgotten to put it back on the high shelf. She sat down with it and counted 10 small coins into her palm. Just 10. "This is all of it," she said. "That's all of it." She set the coins back in the purse and handed it to him. And this time, when she watched him place it on the high shelf, she was smiling. Now let's unpack what Leif's story is really teaching us. Lesson 1. Windfalls don't build wealth. Habits do. Leif got 50 gold coins in a single night. A year later, he was psychologically worse off than before he had ever touched them. His debts were paid, yes. His stall had better stock. But his relationship with money was more broken than it had been the day he left for the valley. This is the windfall trap, and it catches nearly everyone who falls into it. Whether the windfall arrives as a bonus, an inheritance, a lucky investment, a legal settlement, or a business sale, lump sums behave differently than earned income. Earned income arrives in portions. It trains you, week by week or month by month, to manage a flow. A windfall arrives all at once, and it feels like abundance, which is the most dangerous feeling money can produce. Abundance says, you have arrived. You can afford this. You've been careful long enough. Now's the time to feel it. And so you feel it. You spend. You upgrade. You buy the thing you've wanted for years, and then you buy the thing you didn't know you wanted until you had enough money to want it. You help people because generosity is genuinely satisfying, and because it's one of the most easiest things you can do with money you didn't build a system around protecting. Most windfall recipients exhaust their lump sums within 2 to 5 years. Studies of lottery winners consistently show that within 5 years, a substantial majority are in financial positions no better and often worse than before the win. And that's because wealth without the mechanism of accumulation is a structure with no foundation. It impresses everyone right up until it collapses. Real wealth is built by the mechanism, not the amount. 10 coins a day, if automated and consistent, outperforms every windfall because the habit survives the moments when the mathematics get complicated. Habits don't require motivation and don't depend on circumstances being favorable. The question to ask of every financial windfall isn't, what should I buy? But what system should I build? The answer to the first question runs out. The answer to the second one compounds. Lesson 2. Impatience is the most expensive thing you will ever buy. Leif chose 50 coins now, over 10 coins forever. He didn't feel like he was making a choice. It felt obvious, instinctive. That's precisely the problem. We're not wired for compounding. The human brain evolved to respond to immediate, visible rewards over distant, abstract ones. But it's a catastrophic liability in a world where wealth is built over decades. Impatience has a price tag, and it is almost always the most expensive purchase we make. Consider. Every time you sell a long-term investment early because the short-term movement makes you anxious, you're paying the impatience tax. The investor who holds for 20 years and the investor who holds for 2 years aren't making slightly different returns. They're playing entirely different financial games with entirely different outcomes. Every time you take on high-interest debt to acquire something now that you could save toward over time, you're paying the impatience tax. The actual cost of a purchase made on predatory credit is often 2, 3, 4 times the sticker price. Every time you abandon a patient strategy because it hasn't produced visible results on a timeline you expected, you're paying the impatience tax. Compounding is exponential, which means it is invisible for most of its life. The last 10 years of a 40-year compounding curve contain more wealth than the first 30 combined. The cure isn't willpower. Willpower runs out. The cure is structure. Put the money somewhere you cannot easily reach it. Automate the investment before you ever see the deposit. Make patience the default and impulsiveness the friction-filled exception. Lesson 3. Contrast is the enemy of contentment. After the windfall, ordinary life felt like punishment to Leif. Not because ordinary life had changed. It hadn't. The stall was the same. The coins were the same. His wife and daughters were the same. But Leif had recalibrated. He had lived for a while at a level his actual income couldn't sustain, and now the gap between what he had experienced and what he actually had felt not like a normal Tuesday but like a loss. This is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, or, when applied to wealth, the hedonic treadmill. The mechanism works like this. We adapt to pleasures rapidly. Something new becomes the ordinary within weeks, and because we adapt to improvements, they must keep arriving at increasing cost simply to maintain the same emotional baseline. The treadmill moves faster the more you run on it. The financial cost of this is staggering and invisible. Every lifestyle upgrade that becomes the new normal is now a recurring expense. The expensive apartment that felt like a treat becomes the apartment you can't downgrade from without feeling failure. The premium car becomes the car your identity has attached itself to. Each upgrade, once normalized, stops producing pleasure and starts producing pressure. The people who build lasting wealth almost universally live in houses smaller than their income could support. They drive cars that don't announce anything. They understand that the gap between what you earn and what you spend is the engine of all wealth building, and that the most reliable way to protect that gap is to not let the lifestyle expand faster than the income. This requires more than budgeting. It requires a genuine philosophical shift. The recognition that contentment isn't a personality trait. It's a practice, a daily discipline of refusing to let contrast define your experience of what you have. It means measuring progress against your own past rather than your neighbor's present. Your story has different numbers, a different timeline, a different ending, and the ending you get depends almost entirely on whether you can resist the urge to make your story look like his. Lesson 4. The feast you missed might be the best thing that happened to you. Leif arrived too late for the silver. He rode home wet, defeated, 40 other men ahead of him. The whole journey a waste, except that it wasn't. The failed journey sent him down a road in the rain, led him to an old man with ravens and a cloak, and a choice that changed his entire life. He couldn't have known this in the moment. In the moment, it was just failure. The feast he had missed felt irredeemable. But here's the thing. We don't grieve missed opportunities rationally. We grieve them at their apparent peak value, at what they looked like from the outside, before we could know what they cost the people who got them. In investing, the principle is structural. The investor who missed the dot-com boom of the late 1990s wasn't unlucky. They avoided the crash that followed and wiped out the majority of those gains within 2 years. The investor who couldn't get into a hot IPO was saved from the statistical reality that most IPOs underperform the broader market over the 5 years that follow their peak enthusiasm. The company that didn't land the enormous contract was spared the operational strain of delivering against a commitment it wasn't ready to meet, the relationship damage when it inevitably underdelivered. The missed feast redirects. Sometimes it redirects toward something better. The morning is the expensive part. The months or years spent looking back at the table you didn't get to sit at are months and years you're not spending looking forward at what is actually in front of you. Lesson 5. Wealth moves like a tide. This is the deepest paradox of compounding, and the reason most people abandon the strategies that would have made them wealthy. The results are invisible for most of the process. Compounding is exponential. Exponential curves are flat, and then they're not. For the first 2/3 of a compounding journey, the graph looks like almost nothing is happening, and then, in the final third, it bends sharply upward and begins to climb in ways that seem disproportionate to the effort, because they are. The effort was front-loaded. The reward is back-loaded. The majority of the wealth produced by a 40-year investment strategy is created in the last 10 years. This architecture is profoundly discouraging to the human psychology. We expect feedback proportional to effort. We expect that if we work hard and are disciplined and make good decisions, we should be able to see the results accumulating fast enough to feel like it's working. Compounding does not provide this feedback. For years, it provides almost none, and so people decide it isn't working and change strategies. They walk away from a machine that was about to accelerate into the most productive years of its life. Leif's neighbors didn't notice him getting wealthy because wealth, in its patient form, isn't a spectacle. It moves like a tide, so slowly that if you stand at the water's edge and watch, you can't see it rise. It's only when you walk back an hour later and look at where the dry sand used to be that you understand something has been happening the whole time. The tide was always rising. You just couldn't see it from where you were standing. The most dangerous moment for a patient strategy isn't when it fails. It's when it appears to fail. When, after 5 or 10 years, you look at the numbers and they seem modest relative to the effort you have put in. That's the moment most people quit. That's also the moment that's closest to the bend in the curve, the moment just before the tide begins to reshape the shore. If you're 10 years into a patient strategy and feel like nothing has changed, you're not at the beginning. You're at the base of the exponential. The difficult years are behind you. What is ahead is why you started. Don't walk away from the tide because you can't see it moving. It is always moving. And one morning you'll walk back down to the shore and everything will have changed. I hope you enjoyed this story and learned a thing or two from it. We've got more stories like this, so stick around for more Tales from the Money Tree.